requires the system to develop a suite of options that incentivize property owners to participate and a way to track effectiveness and engagement with these programs, allowing all the entities involved in these efforts to scale based on demand. So we're going to talk about some strategies that are underway. The CEO Homeless Initiative is currently involved in funding 4 strategies for engaging private property owners to rent their properties to tenant-based voucher holders. These include the Flexible Housing Subsidy Pool unit acquisition, resident and property supportive services, master leasing, and the Landlord Incentive Program. 3 of these strategies are led by the agencies who have joined me today, and all 3 of these strategies are leveraging Housing and Homelessness Incentive Program dollars that were awarded to the county by the managed care plans LA Care and HealthNet earlier this calendar year. Oops, too fast there. In March of 2023, LA Care and HealthNet awarded $114 million in Housing and Homeless Incentive Program funding to the Homeless Initiative. These investments fund 2 strategies. The first is to identify the need of unhoused people through field assessments to determine who requires assistance with activities of daily living to move into permanent housing. This is especially important to the growing number of seniors and people with disabilities experiencing homelessness. The second, which we will discuss in more depth today, is to secure leases on as many as 1,900 units in the private rental market and lease them directly to people experiencing homelessness, including those with tenant-based rental subsidies who struggle to lease up with traditional landlords. Of the investment, $55.6 million of these HIP funding dollars are dedicated to this unit acquisition effort. And first we will turn to Dr. Adams-Kellum, who will talk to us about the LAHSA program.
Great, thank you. When people ask what is special about our encampment resolution efforts is that we are not only offering interim housing, we're offering a permanent solution, a pathway to a change in their lives, and that's why the unit acquisition work is so critical. One important part of that is the resident property support services. That is a landlord incentive program that seeks to secure units by providing owners with a monthly cash incentive and assigns a residential coordinator to the unit. LAHSA worked with nonprofit provider PATH, People Assisting the Homeless, to launch the program in 2021. Each participant in this program is connected to a tenant-based supportive service. The case manager assesses each participant's rental assistance needs and will provide the landlord with a breakdown of rental responsibility by tenant and by agency. While the RPSS program does not provide any rental guarantees if the tenant fails to pay their portion of the rent, the program does provide a monthly incentive to the owner who may use incentives to cover costs associated with tenancy, including unit repairs, lost rents, and other building operating expenses. It is important to note that the RPSS program is a pilot and supports the framework and development of LAHSA's master lease strategy, which I'm going to talk about. In the master leasing model, LAHSA leases whole buildings or a block of units from a property owner's portfolio to permanently house people experiencing homelessness. LAHSA enters into direct agreements with owners, ranging from 3 to 5 years, with up to 3 extensions of 1 year each. Additionally, LAHSA will cover all maintenance and repairs to units. It has some exclusions, and it also covers property management in single-site buildings, security, liability insurance coverage, refill vacant units, and assigning supportive services for each tenant for the duration of the lease term. The benefits of this model are tremendous, and they include an increased number of units available, removed a sense of landlord bias with LAHSA as the landlord, no documentation required at move-in, and efficient use of permanent housing resources. The initial set of buildings are located in both the unincorporated area of Los Angeles County and the city of Los Angeles. There is a total of 5 buildings for the initial phase, 106 units overall, and all are in SPA 6. And I have the addresses. Units are made available first to the SPA they're in. So, SPA 6 buildings are initially available to SPA 6 providers. Units are then allocated into 2 groups. Group A, any provider of the SPA supporting any encampment resolution initiative. Group B, any provider of the SPA supporting any interim housing sites. A 50-50 split of units between groups A and B is what's used. So for example, if there are 20 units, 10 would be reserved for group A, 10 would be reserved for group B. Trying our best to be fair. Participants are enrolled on a first come, first approved basis. We are not utilizing the traditional matching process or the lineup. We think that will make things move much quicker. And I see Fija's nodding and says, yes, everything that speeds up the process is what we want to see. There is no by name list, and master leasing should not be misconstrued as a PSH nor a program per se. It is a unit acquisition strategy. Buildings are treated as an available rental from a landlord with LASA acting as the landlord. And now I want to talk a little bit about the time-limited subsidy program. It is tailored towards individuals or households who are low income and at or below 50% area median income, or AMI, for the Los Angeles County. Time-limited subsidy, or we call TLS, provides landlords with cash incentive to lease to a participant that is experiencing homelessness and a portion of rental assistance for a period not to exceed 24 months, even though we do extend at times. Providers assist participants in obtaining housing stability through a tailored package of services, while continuously assessing for housing stabilization barriers that could reasonably be expected to recur in the future. TLS utilizes progressive assistance, also known as progressive engagement, which is an approach to working with people experiencing homelessness to end their homelessness quickly by tailoring services and financial assistance to what each individual or household needs. This nationally recognized best practice allows us to customize our assistance and provide the greatest assistance to people with the highest demonstrated barriers to successful housing. When implementing progressive assistance, we utilize a right size support model. That means the support and financial assistance increases and decreases as the need arises. Progressive assistance means starting with assistance that is very basic and learning how much need there is, and we adjust accordingly. The benefits of progressive assistance include high levels of program enrollment, utilization through lowering of barriers and offering trauma-informed services. It requires quick enrollment from community queue and matching process. It helps participants obtain identification documents in the event clients need referrals to other housing resources, PSH, affordable housing, etc. It continuously calls for updated housing service plans in collaboration with the client to ensure appropriate resources are paired to the client based on need. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Sarah on the unit acquisition efforts in the Department of Health Services, Housing for Health.
Great. Very excited to be able to talk about the flexible housing subsidy pool and the work that we've been doing to secure units. The flexible housing subsidy pool is a really critical fiscal and contractual tool that we have at Housing for Health. that was created in 2014 in partnership with Brilliant Corners, who's our nonprofit partner who operates the flexible housing pool. Since it was created in 2014, we've been able to house over 12,500 Angelinos, and do so using a few different strategies that I'll talk about. The first is around engaging landlords to secure units that are out in the open market. We call this scattered site housing. This is about just regular units that are out in the market, in apartment buildings, those kinds of things. Brilliant Corners offers a range of supports to landlords to be able to secure these units for our flex pool participants, and offers supports like vacancy loss, damage mitigation, and on-call support 24/7 if there are any issues that arise that the landlord needs help resolving. Brilliant Corners also enters into agreements to develop and sustain project-based sites. So these are permanent supportive housing that is built specifically for the purpose of offering permanent supportive housing for people with complex health and behavioral health conditions. And through this strategy, Brilliant Corners enters into agreements that are different than the master lease agreements that Dr. Adams-Kellum was talking about. We call them master rental subsidy service agreements. And Brilliant Corners is not the tenant of the building, but they enter into agreements that hold the units for participants who are referred through the flexible housing subsidy pool. We also use flexible housing subsidy pool to make placements into enriched residential care settings. So these are adult residential facilities or residential care facilities for the elderly, most commonly known as boarding care. So for people who are in need of permanent housing, but who need support with activities of daily living. So we're really happy to be able to have this tool to make these much needed placements that really wouldn't be possible without it. And then finally, Brilliant Corners provides financial assistance to obtain and maintain housing. So they pay rent subsidies, but they also provide move-in support, so paying like housing deposits for federal subsidy holders, as well as providing short-term financial assistance for programs like our homelessness prevention program, short-term assistance to help stabilize people in their housing. If we move on to the next slide, I'll talk about the units that we've secured through Flexible Housing Subsidy Pool today. We have about 1,900 units that are secured for using project-based agreements. We have about 3,200 units that are secured today with people housed in them through our scattered site agreements, and about 1,400 people who are housed today in an enriched residential care settings using the Flex Pool. We are in the process of growth with the Flex Pool, which we're very excited about, and are in the process right now of executing agreements for 150 new units that are funded through the Housing and Homelessness Incentive Program, HIP, and 312 new units for the Office of Diversion and Reentry. And we have a plan with Brilliant Corners to reopen our RFP in January 2024 for continued expansion for both of those programs until all of our funding has been allocated.
Thank you. I am now going to wrap up and tie this all together. A few weeks ago, just before the Thanksgiving holiday, we had an opportunity to see how these strategies, partnerships, and collaborations, Pathway Home, unit acquisition, and housing subsidies, shared today come together to quickly move 20 people into permanent housing. While the Homeless Initiative often presents these efforts as individual programs or innovations, today's presentation provided an opportunity for us to elevate how these programs are intended to work together to increase flow through the system. They are intentionally aligned to support clients from street to a permanent home. While 19 others joined him on his journey, today I'm going to share the story of William Escribana, who you can see in these pictures. William was among nearly 6 people surviving in RVs in the East Gardena, West Rancho Domingos area who accepted the county's offer of interim housing during the first RV-focused Pathway Home encampment resolution on August 22nd. William stayed at a hotel operated by the county's nonprofit service provider, where he received supportive services, including housing navigation. Just before Thanksgiving, he and his beloved dog, Dabs, moved into permanent housing in a master lease building in unincorporated LA County. William's journey from encampment to apartment, his pathway home, took 90 days. we are very happy that William is home along with all of his other new residents. Thank you, supervisors.
Thank you very much. I will now turn to Supervisor Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and appreciate the set matter being before us. I want to thank Supervisor Barger, my co-author on the RV pilot project, and because I think that last slide is a visual depiction of what we envisioned a year ago when we introduced the motion, and now we're here. So I was there that day in August, met William, and to see this full process is very helpful. We, of course, just need to scale it up, but it's good to see how we can now make it happen. So I appreciate it. Appreciate today's presentation. Very excited with regard to the HERE's viewer. Very excited for phase 2, because I think from my perspective, a part of our challenge is telling the story, which is why I was hopeful, glad to have this set matter so we are all clear and that the public can see progress in the making. Because one consistent thing we hear, sometimes from city leaders, frankly, is, where's the county in this? Where's the county in this? There's this impression that the county's work is invisible. The work the county is doing in terms of the supportive services in the permanent supportive housing supportive services. So I think the HERE's viewer will be very helpful for people to see visually the role every level of government is participating in, so we can kind of erase those old tapes about the county being absent. How are Measure H dollars being spent? People are in hotels and they're not getting services. We need to erase those tapes and replace them with information that I think the HERE's viewer will help us do. So quick question, once it goes public or even before, how will other departments utilize the data to really help inform, I think, budget requests and decisions, and ultimately kind of improve the quality and the kind of municipal, if you will, services kind of provided?
Yeah, thank you for that question. One way in which we are currently using it and which we will become visible as well as we go through establishing the viewer is that we are looking at the need for non-displacement cleanups. So these are cleanups that we do at encampments to help with sanitation and trash removal, to keep the space clear for those encampment residents as well as for those communities while we are waiting to schedule a full Pathway Home encampment resolution. So we are looking at the pipeline of need for those non-displacement cleanups and using that to work with our partners. In particular, our partners in this area would be the Department of Public Works, the Sheriff's Department host teams, as well as the LASA host teams, to be able to look at some options and come back and make some recommendations for scaling up those encampment resolutions so that we can be more responsive to the actual need as demonstrated in the HERE's viewer, and so that we could be able to resolve those, do those encampment cleanups in a much more timely way. So we will be coming back to this board with that recommendation.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that as well. And going backwards just a bit with regard to the Pathway Home dashboard, and I don't know if you're going to make this public, but again, I'm really focusing on the unincorporated communities that have been impacted because I represent 19 of them, and we hear from residents of those communities daily. So on the dashboard, will it ever show actual dates and locations and connections to county services?
Yeah, so we have added the new element, which you can see, which is the number housed. We were very excited to be able to add that element. We now want to give it the depth that shows the detail behind all of those elements. So the locations, the number of clients served at the different encampment resolutions, and then to start layering in the type of data that I talked about that we recently did for Insight Safe, where we're looking at those connections, those clients' connections to county resources, to now build that out for Pathway Home as well and incorporate that into the dashboard.
Excellent, thank you, because again, I think that tells the full story about the role everyone is playing in connecting these dots And again, it is my goal that we erase those old tapes that people have in their mind about where's the county? We don't see. People are sitting in hotels and they're not getting support. Well, we know every day that they are. So thank you very much for today's presentation. I look forward to the build out of this data, and so it could help inform the general public's perspective and attitude, and help inform us in future policy setting, and in budget allocations, and to allow us to see geographically, because as I always say, we've got to build out this system county-wide. Also appreciated hearing the prioritization in terms of who's getting housed, and how people in a spa, where the master lease or whatever, the tool that is used is being executed, that they are the ones that get to be housed there as well. Thank you very much for your presentations. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you all. Great presentation. Sheree, you may have answered this, but will the homeless encampment automated response system view or have a city component so that our local municipal partners can view selected criteria specifically within their jurisdictions alone?
So yeah, we'll be able, it'll be display geography, and we'll be able to do different types of sorting to get to that level of detail. Yeah, we are trying to balance, there's providing information on after we've done the work and providing information on upcoming work. And we are trying to be insensitive and aware of our encampments and our encampment residents, and giving them, being thoughtful about the level of detail that's provided in a public viewer. And so we will be working as we share with the board offices and are getting your input on level of detail, especially for things that are upcoming, which is different versus resolutions that have occurred. We'll be working with you on the level of detail that we're providing, but you will be able to do some geographic sorting.
And I appreciate that, but I know that coordinated efforts with cities is important too, because I know in my district, in the unincorporated area, you have to give notice and then they cross the street into the city of Pasadena, and then, and like, so when we do a coordinated effort, we're better equipped to address.
Yeah, thank you for asking that additional question. We have been deeply investing in coordinating with all of our local jurisdictions, our cities, as well as unincorporated areas. We are seeking with all of our efforts, be they a full encampment resolution such as Pathway Home, or be they a non-displacement cleanup, that we will be coordinating those efforts with whatever jurisdiction we're in and the adjacent ones. So we are partnering together so that everybody has visibility into the work that is happening. And we have grown our team specifically in that regard to be able to do that type of partnership with our local jurisdictions and cities.
So I know, and following up on that, I know when we go out and do outreach with the LASA team, who are phenomenal in our district, the outreach teams, committed, dedicated individuals that truly are making a difference. But we do follow-up when we do the cleanup, because oftentimes we clean it up, and then a week and a half later, it's a new beginning of another encampment popping up. And I think, to Supervisor Mitchell's point, when the county is there, but when people see that, they think, well, then what are you doing? So are we doing follow-up when we do cleanup, to make sure that it's not just moving it and allowing another group to come in, that we're continuing doing the outreach?
Yeah, we have experts here, so I'm going to let them jump in as that, because it is the LASA teams and the county's multidisciplinary teams and home teams that keep on going out to sites. But I will just start by saying that specifically when we're doing this encampment resolution work, we are seeking to serve everybody in that encampment, and so we are seeking to bring everybody inside to completely resolve the encampment. We are working, depending on which jurisdiction it's in, or if it's ours, we're looking to clean up and maintain that site. And then we're also, the outreach teams continue to go back to be able to engage anybody who might come to that site to help keep that site clear and bring that person inside.
Yeah, I think that's important. I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Cohn, because truly it is prime real estate in many times where the encampments are located. And so by moving out one group, you've got another group that's ready to move in.
Yeah, the maintenance of that site post housing intervention is critically important. What we found, and we're going to test this at LASA, is to move some of our outreach teams to overnight, because we know that's where a lot of the folks begin to return. to sleep. And we want to be able to offer housing overnight to encourage people to go in rather than turning that space back into an encampment. It also is really important to articulate that this area is closed to camping. It seems like a very simple statement, but when it's made and it's followed up with housing resources and continued support, making sure outreach teams return and keep that message going, is really important. And the community also helps by going back into the space, reusing the space, and being a community again together for housed and unhoused folks being honored. Unhoused folks are honored by the housing intervention, and we don't want other folks falling into pain and suffering by living outdoors. So we want to keep those supportive services going. I think that after hour 24/7 type of outreach is critically important in this work.
100% agree, and I really appreciate that. That is good news. And then my last question, I'll just make a statement, is that when I'm going out, I'm seeing more and more pregnant women with substance abuse. How are we? And I know one woman who actually it was a night out, and I talked to her, and she wanted help, but she had 4 dogs and didn't want to leave them, and said she'd be there in the morning. We sent someone, and she was gone. Do we have capacity? Because that's not just a bed. That is a highly specialized bed for someone who's going to need not only treatment for their pregnancy, but also for their addiction. How are we addressing that?
Yep, I can talk for part of it. So I will say that our mobile clinics are actually equipped to be providing women's health services. I was just meeting with our mobile clinics team last week, and I heard 12% of unsheltered women are actually pregnant. So really high rates, and it's really critically important that we're bringing those services to those women if they're not able to get into a brick and mortar clinic and get connected to the vital prenatal care. So we're doing it on the streets with our multidisciplinary teams and with our mobile clinics to be making sure that pregnant women have access to care. And then, as you mentioned, the housing is really important. So at Housing for Health, we have some beds that are specialized for women. And then I know that LASA, which operates really the family system, serves pregnant women within that system. And it really is a vulnerable population. It's an opportunity, right? Think about early intervention and prevention. Like, what an opportunity to intervene for the unborn child, and be making sure that their mother is cared for and has the support, so when they enter the world, we can be helping to prevent future generations of homelessness.
Yeah, and would you keep us posted? Because, I mean, this is something that actually, literally kept me up at night. So I would like to know what we can do to help you, to help them. So with that, I want to thank you, Cherie, Dr. Kellum, who I love working with, and being on LASA with the mayor and with the chair, and Sarah for coming before the board today. I also want to thank your staff at the CEO Homeless Initiative, LASA, and DHS Housing for Health for all the work you do daily. And I think it's important for us to highlight it, and make no mistake, it's not the silver bullet, and we're not eradicating homelessness overnight, but I think it's important for the public to know what we are doing to address this crisis. You've covered quite a bit today, and I'm happy to learn about the state's decision to fund additional Project Home Key sites, especially the ones in the 5th District. And I want to publicly thank the City of Lancaster and Palmdale for stepping up, because as we all know, everyone says, we've got a homeless problem, we want you to fix it, and then when you go into the community, it's like, we didn't meet here, go over there. But you have cities that are standing tall, wanting to work towards solutions, and I think what is
at a time, instead of 5 or 10, it really does change everything. And it means that sometimes people will be in interim housing a little longer. So we thank you for walking alongside us as we're learning, and we will need to adjust, and we will need to figure out where we invest or not. And I look forward to that conversation ongoing, so thank you.
Supervisor Solis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I wanna thank the A-Team. You remind me of Charlie's Angels. In a good way, right? Because you are helping us to break the myth and the stereotypes and what has been said about the county's inability to address this really important challenge. And I'm so happy that Dr. Adams, you're here, Kellum, with us. I was very pleased to see you in the San Gabriel Valley at Whittier Narrows, celebrating with over 200 unhoused people that came out and were served meals. They got showers, they got haircuts, they got health care, their pets were treated, they got food, and so many different things. And I would hope that we could expand that model with you in other parts of our unincorporated areas and even our cities that can join us. But thank you for taking the time. And I particularly want to thank you, Cherie, for everything you've done. I know on your list, I was asking my staff, we partner with our cities. Some of our cities are not getting the credit, in my opinion, that are doing good things. Like the city of El Monte, they have how many home keys, permanent home keys now. And they are taking on and shouldering so much more in the San Gabriel Valley. And to a certain extent, it's somewhat unfair because other cities, or I want to say in the COG area representation, that they're not really stepping up. And so how can we really continue to but talk about the successes? Because I don't think that they're getting the success information that you're giving us today. So I would urge us to go to the COGS, and if it's one-on-one or 3 cities at a time, we need to do it because this is such compelling information. And yes, we're kind of chipping away at the iceberg, but we're making a dent. And there's a lot of investment. We have a lot of partners. And I really want to thank you for conducting the Pathway Home operation in Pomona. I was happy that you came to the 1st District. And I hope that we can hurriedly get out to East LA, the biggest unincorporated, or one of the largest areas right now, where we have all these challenges. So I applaud all of you for the work that you're doing. And I know there's a lot of sensitivities to this. And I know you're committed. And just as we are, so I want to continue to work with you. One of the things I did want to raise though is with respect to CEO, if you could elaborate, CEO, on the subsidies that we provide for the unhoused. How does that funding come through, and if you can describe that.
Thank you, Supervisor Solis, and I'm going to start and I'll let Cherie Todoroff finish. One of the things that I'd like to say is that those flexible subsidies are oftentimes the glue, I think, between success and failure. Oftentimes our funding is restricted, and sometimes we need to provide services and interventions that are not written down in some county code or policy, and so we need that flexibility to be able to offer sometimes cash subsidies. I'm going to allow Dr. Adams-Kellum and Cherie Todoroff to talk specifically about that funding source and how much of a role Measure H actually plays in that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have done significantly is invest in time-limited subsidies and also flexible housing subsidy pool subsidies so that we have those housing resources to be able to match to people and help them move inside as quickly as possible. These are the glue that bring people inside, and we are making significant investments with Measure H. So that's one of our biggest sort of funding buckets because we are really focused on permanent housing and ultimately to move people into permanent housing as quickly as possible. We are also seeking now intentionally with all of our efforts to create that alignment so that we have, when we're doing, for example, an encampment resolution, we know the number of people in the encampment, we know the number of beds that we need for interim housing, of course also considering that additional people may come and we need to be prepared to bring them inside as well, and then the number of exits to permanent housing that we need. So we are intentionally funding permanent housing and rental subsidies for everybody that we're serving through Pathway Home, for example, so that we have that flow and we know that everybody has a permanent housing exit. We are also, with any other effort that we are seeking to operationalize, and I'll use, for example, LASA has a state encampment resolution grant, and DHS also has a state encampment resolution grant. Now when we are seeking those dollars from our other state and federal partners, we're not just asking for the money to bring somebody inside. We're making sure that we're also asking for the money, and we have a pathway to bring people all the way to permanent housing. So we're building those rental subsidies into those other funding requests as well. And that's part of what is funding some of the subsidies that Sarah was referring to, and also some of them at LASA as well.
I mean, I think it's just important to note how vital Measure H is and how reliant we are on it for these subsidies that are making the difference in whether a family is in a car versus in a safe place. And that is something we must sustain, and it's a huge lift, and we thank you for your leadership in allowing it, because what we're doing now in post-Measure H is vastly different at scale than before. It's life-saving.
And just kind of lastly is, I really want to thank you for the work that you're doing on the Skid Row plan that we started a few years ago. And I know some people were reluctant about getting engaged in it, but I think it's successful. And it just shows us as a template how far we can go with some of the hardest issues that I have ever seen in my lifetime, to see what is happening there and how we can improve it and create more partnerships with other stakeholders. The Crocker facility that's soon going to be on board. I'd love to later on get a presentation on that from you all. And then just lastly, I know the mayor is recently reported how many individuals that she has been able to put into shelter. And I'm wondering, where does the county play a role in that in terms of the accounting? And so maybe that, I don't know if you can answer all that right now, or if we can somehow get a better sense of who's doing what, and where are the apples, where are the oranges, or what is it?
Yeah, so we have now additional information on how the county is supporting Inside Safe clients. So that is part of what I'm going to provide you with more depth on as we go into our next opportunity to come together. And we're already sharing that information with stakeholders, but we also want to make it available to the public as well and share everybody, how to interpret it and use it. But we are capturing, so Inside Safe, typically similar to Pathway Home, the city, when they are doing Inside Safe operations, they are setting up the motels and funding the providers to operate those motels to bring people inside into the Inside Safe interim housing. As people move on their journey to permanent housing, they're often touching county resources there. Generally, the county is funding the supportive services for everybody going into permanent supportive housing, even if that's a city development, for example, through their Triple H portfolio, but the county is funding the supportive services for those clients as they go into permanent housing. And the county is also the largest funder of the other type of housing that we have, which is the time-limited subsidies, as well as the supportive services that support clients who are going inside with those time-limited subsidies.
And I would just add the outreach teams that are so essential to the encampment resolution are funded by Measure H dollars through DHS, and that is an essential part of the fabric of LASA being out there coordinating with the outreach teams that have the relationships, getting people to yes.
And lastly, I think this is really good segue for us to think about as we go into the next phase of Measure H, to tout all these accomplishments and really be able to showcase them in a way that is so personal to people that might move them in the right direction. So again, thank you for an outstanding presentation. Thank you.
Supervisor Hahn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the three of you, your leadership. I don't know if they're Charlie's Angels, but I was just kind of thinking, sometimes it takes a woman. And I'm looking at this dais, and it's very intentional, and our perspectives and our vision, I think, is showing very much today. I'm pleased to see that we are taking such strong, intentional action in resolving these encampments and getting the units that it takes to make that work. I do have some questions. First, regarding Pathway Home. So Cherie, when you were here last time, you told me that for those individuals who are not on the list by name, a special team will be there to engage them. And just to remind everybody, that was my experience when I showed up for an inside safe with Councilmember McCosker a while back. It was clear that we do so much work to make sure we have 25 people, we have 25 rooms. It's a 3-day extravaganza of work. But clearly the word gets out. And there are those who hear about it, and we have that window of opportunity when they say, you know what, I'm also ready to come inside, but their names aren't on the list. Can you tell me, Cherie, we don't get extra hotel rooms apparently as a resource, but can you elaborate a little bit on what are the options for those who are not on the list for a pathway home?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do generally, so we know the challenges of securing the interim housing. That is one of the things that has been part of the pacing of our scheduling of pathway home operations, is to be able to secure that interim housing. We do everything possible to secure interim housing that will accommodate the size of the encampment that we're seeking to resolve. We usually have a little bit of space there, and we take full advantage of that. And we have, we're really focused on bringing the residents of that particular encampment.
I know. But for the ones who are not on the list and show up and they finally decided that me too.
They're important
I
too.
wanna go.
We need to bring them inside as well. They are important as well. We have teams, we have staff, dedicated staff at every pathway home operation, and their job is specifically to support people who are coming like day of, and to assess their needs and to match them to appropriate housing. So they may go into that pathway home hotel, they may go into a different interim housing site that we are able to secure for them. LASA is very much involved with supporting that effort. They are an important partner there, as are our county partners, who also have access to interim housing beds and are also often involved in bringing people inside. But when this happens, we are working with everybody who shows up and offering them an option to come inside to interim housing.
And because a lot of these people, I'm sure there's been work done with them in their lives, but as you all know, it's a two-way agreement. The person has to want to be on a different track in their life, have to want to come inside. And when that moment happens, even if they're not on the list, I hope we take advantage of it.
I just want to note that oftentimes the word does get out, and people who've been in the encampment, but maybe not recently, hear, and they come back. And we have a team, we call it Tier 2. So if you hear me refer to Tier 2, that's the notion of the folks who are not on the original list, but we're there with a list of resources available within our interim housing availability to make sure folks get in. So whether it's a motel that we've set aside, whether it's a winter shelter bed, or whether it is just an available site, we have that list as well, and we are sort of on the side there helping those folks who showed up day of to get help. And it's not really a successful intervention if we don't house everyone that's there, and I really hear where you're coming from.
Thank you. And Dr. Kellums, I really have appreciated your leadership so far for LASA. As you know, at that press conference where you weren't exactly sworn in, I forget what it was. We were all hearing the announcement that you would take over LASA, and I did not hide my skepticism, nor my little bit of a cynicism. And I think I speak for a lot of the public who is also frustrated and does, hear about the millions, billions of dollars that we're spending. And I was going to give you an opportunity to comment or clarify or just address, I guess on the news last week, there was a story about the millions of dollars that have been spent so far, and only 270 people have been permanently housed from a particular area. And I felt that was so misleading, that narrative was so misleading, but that's what the public latched on to. See, we're spending all this money and only 270 people are permanently housed. So can you speak to people who maybe have misunderstood what it is that we do with encampment resolutions and sort of the difference between permanent housing and this emergency response that we have about bringing people inside.
I appreciate that. I think for so long we focused on moving people when a housing unit emerges. I mean, that's why the emergency and the courage of this body to say we're going to call a state of emergency and we're going to focus on unsheltered homelessness. It's very costly, but it saves lives. I appreciate you noting that it was misleading to note that only 255 people got permanent housing because 1,900 people were housed through that effort. We've never seen that many people in such a short time come out of a deadly environment where their lives are being cut short to come into a place that they said yes to. Zero arrests. That means people said yes to something meaningful and life-changing. But it didn't erase. Our encampment resolution efforts don't erase our problem of having inadequate numbers and stock of affordable housing. On average, it takes people 6 months to a year to move indoors often. And I think we're at about 4 months or so on average, which is much shorter than the average stays. So that we are focusing, and we shouldn't be deterred by those kinds of media blitzes or,
Right,
pushback.
But I think we all have to recommit ourselves to our message.
Yes.
And we all have to commit ourselves to really getting the narrative out there, because the other narrative sometimes wins in the hearts and minds of an already frustrated and cynical public. And I think it's up to us. And you make a really good point. Yesterday we inaugurated Link Housing in Wilmington, and one of the people that got in there was one who started out in a tiny home in Torrance like a year and a half ago, right? And so, but that is a success story, right? That's what our goal is. But our first is to bring them inside.
That's right, and the cost of keeping people on the streets is extraordinary. We once did a survey of 90 extremely vulnerable folks, and in a 90-day period, about $500,000 had been spent. So if you start to look at the cost of keeping people on the streets versus what it costs for 1,900, not 250, yes, the real success is in how many are permanently housed. But in our encampment resolution efforts, we are resolving encampments through interim housing that then is paired with permanency. And that's because our system doesn't have immediate available permanent housing. So I appreciate you asking for the full message. We can't be deterred by focusing on these dear folks who are dying on our streets.
And I think for a while, everyone was a little bit complacent about encampments, because in some people's minds that sort of was inside. But encampments are not safe. They're particularly not safe for women and for children, and that is not being inside, being in encampment. So thank you for your leadership. We, besides my cynicism when you first came in, I am 100%, but I told you that day that I was with you 100%. And you've also had my back as well, and anytime my staff has reached out to you for assistance, you have resolved our concerns in such a quick manner. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I too want to thank you for the report. I know that you're looking to provide a lot of information and applaud you on your transparency. And the volume of it is hard to digest sort of all in one sitting. I think we might all agree. And so I know you're figuring out how do you synthesize, but also make sure you're getting us the data points that we're asking for. So we'll continue working on that as we have these conversations. But thank you for looking at all of the missions that we've assigned and what our objectives are. I think people really want to know how many encampments are being resolved, how many people are getting into housing, where this is happening, and what it's costing us on a sort of global basic level as we get into all of the details. And so those top lines, I think, can help guide our conversation. conversation going forward. I know that you've highlighted with the delegated authorities what that has done for DHS. Excited to see that, and I know that much more has been done through departments throughout the county. So would love to see, how we are connecting hiring, decreasing vacancies, and what the outcomes are, what the successes are as we're increasing that hiring. Because I know our staff is key to making sure that we're getting this work done. So making those connections, I think, will help us sort of synthesize again the information that you're bringing forward. Pathway Home, our partner to Inside Safe, is now building in the lessons from Inside Safe, but also expanding countywide. Glad to see that program alive and well and reaching some of those complex locations as well that are interjurisdictional, how we're actually not allowing the boundaries of government to prevent us from taking action. So kudos to you on that. As far as the HERE's viewer, I'm clear that this right now is just a database that's entered into by LASD, and you had mentioned that Inside Safe is a forthcoming partner. Is there a way to integrate information that exists throughout HMIS, for example, so that way we can get a clear, a comprehensive picture? Is that possible?
Yeah, we will. OLASA is already involved as part of the teams that are involved in identifying the encampments that go into HERES, but we will work with LASA to see if there's additional data points in HMIS that we would want to bring into it so we have that more comprehensive picture.
Yeah, I think we hear often, people want to see where these locations are and the progress that we're making, and making sure especially that we're equity focused and investing resources where they need to be. So more improvements to come, I'm hearing, but we're glad to have this as a start. I know that you had mentioned that the dashboard on Inside Safe slide was just for illustrative purposes, but it did say 27% are connected to a county-funded permanent housing resource. Does that mean there are 73% who are not? And if that's the case, what happens to them?
So that particular data point is a reference to permanent housing. So it does not reflect all of the clients who have come inside into interim housing, which is the vast majority of Inside Safe clients. So as Dr. Adams-Kellen was talking about, there is work to seek to connect those Inside Safe clients as well as Pathway Home clients to permanent housing exits as quickly as possible. And the work, as we do know, we do have insufficient affordable housing. And so we are doing everything possible to increase the pace of being able to connect people to permanent housing. And our master leasing model and those investments is one of the biggest tools that we're working on right now, especially with so many clients with these tenant-based housing resources. They just need a property that is available to them. And if we are master leasing the property and managing the tenant selection pool for that property, we will have expedited access into permanent housing placements.
So how soon do we expect the Home Keys sites to come online? I'm clear where they are and how many they are, but I didn't hear the timeline piece.
Okay, that is a great question, and I did not come with all of my Home Key data points today. They are on a rolling basis coming online. They're in different stages of, we already have sites occupied, we have sites soon ready to be occupied, and we have sites that are still under renovation. I will be happy to share all of the details with all of the offices.
Okay, that to the previous point, making sure that we're getting them in that housing is key. Did I hear correctly that with TLS only 60% are getting housed?
That was a study point that recent research of clients who have time-limited subsidies. This might be an opportunity for Dr. Adams-Kellen to step in because we have adjusted the way in which clients are getting matched that resource. It used to be they would get matched to the subsidy and then go on that journey to search for the housing. That has contributed to the underutilization of time-limited subsidies over time because we have that period of time where the money is sitting, waiting for the client to use it, but they're not using it yet. There's been an adjustment in the system. Shall I let you speak to that in terms of where we are matching clients to the housing navigation resource, and then when they are able to secure the unit, they're then able to tap into that time-limited subsidy resource, and that allows the maximum utilization of the time-limited subsidies to reduce that underutilization. So we are working closely not only on a sort of program adjustment to increase full utilization, but also specifically on securing more housing units for clients through strategies such as master leasing so that they have units to move into.
Dr. Adams-Kelly, did you want to add on?
She hit it out the park.
Okay, so I would just, so in the interest of time, I'll just say to you, as we're talking about unit acquisition, would love to see coordination among all of the departments and programs that are working with landlords, so we're not going to the same limited pool of landlords, but instead expanding out to bring more landlords into that program, because we need, certainly, it's clear from everything that you've shared here today, we need more resources in that regard. And we also want to make sure that we're expanding and scaling up master leasing, taking lessons learned. I'm hearing you as my colleagues are asking, where do you need help? Demonstrating you are clearly doing the work. And I know, as Supervisor Mitchell indicated, there are often questions about what is being done, but it's also helpful for you to surface where areas of improvement are, so we can help you and make sure that you have the resources that are needed too. So I know it's always a delicate dance when we're having this conversation publicly, but identifying where we need to strengthen up our work so we can continue to move faster and scale up faster, I think is helpful too.
Yeah, and I mean, well, one of the things, I didn't raise it earlier because this board is so committed and has demonstrated that over and over again, but it's come up several times today. Our biggest challenge is affordable housing. The availability of affordable housing at the number that we need in order to bring people inside, and also to be able to keep and support people in the housing that they're in. So everything that this board has done and continues to do to encourage and support the siting of housing in all of our communities, to invest in it, to partner in it, that is what we need. We need to continue to double down on all of our, as was alluded to, our work with cities. Their cities are participating at different levels in terms of supporting the siting of permanent housing within their communities. We need every city to stand up. We need affordable housing across all of our communities, and that is ultimately what's going to solve homelessness.
Chair, if I could just, actually give kudos to you all, because on the eviction prevention on your chart here, that is so essential. We really have to beef that up, and also, tenant protections have to come in place, whether it's legal or subsidies for landlords, but also for mom and pop landlords, but primarily helping those tenants right now that are going to, hopefully, we don't see a large number, but in any case, we need to let them know that we're going to fight for them, and you all are standing up with us. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank our chair, because I know she's been tenacious on this as well.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for your presentation today. Executive Officer, please call the members of the public who have signed up to speak on this item.
Well, between places, Red Chief Hunt and Salam Alem, please come forward and staff will assist you. As a final reminder for participants on the telephone, if you would like to address item set matter 1, if you have not already done so, please press 1 then 0 now to be placed in the speaking queue. Moderator, may we have the first speaker, please?
And to be clear, this is set matter 2. We want folks to speak on set matter 2.
I'm calling in regards to speak on the matter while the lots of representatives here. To start out, I want to give my comments to Mrs. Barger. She's the most sane one here on the panel. They do not have an answering phone service. If you call LASA, I had an elderly person tell me she called LASA, she wanted to get information. You guys are investing in websites and all these other things. No one answers the phone at LASA. Also, 2 people said they filed a grievance at the grievance email. No one responds. If you call right now before you make a vote, call LASA. Just call right now as an individual needing help. No one's going to answer the telephone. So how is it that you're giving this department millions and millions of dollars and they can't have a basic phone answering service to tell people where to go or what website to use? But you keep implementing other millions of dollars to other departments, but they don't even pick up the phone during business hours. How is that helping people that may not have a computer that are homeless? And it's very, very, very biased. And I feel that things should be changed, and people need to have an answering service or a way to communicate. A lot of people may not have access to a phone. The one call they get, they should be able to reach someone to say, go to this website. Thank you.